the Ravens just beat the Seahawks 37-3. And this is the second NFC opponent that is a playoff lock that they have dismantled in this sort of way. The Ravens are 7-2 on the season. They beat the Seahawks 37-3, and they beat the Lions 38-6. Do you think that they are the best team in the AFC? Dehls, I'll start with you.
It's hard not to think that right now. Their defense is playing at such an elite level. I know we talked about the Browns a ton kind of to start off the year. I think the Ravens have probably taken over best defense in the NFL right now. What they're doing to formidable opponents, right? We're not talking they're going up against Zach Wilson every week, right? The Lions going into that game was, can the Lions come out the NFC? And they smoked them by 30.
Killed them.
And then you have the Seahawks game where Seattle, I don't think is Super Bowl caliber or anything like that, but they were in first place in the NFC West going into this game, right? This was a team that, just put up 24 points against the Cleveland Browns, and Baltimore killed them. They scored 3 points. This Baltimore defense right now is playing at such a high level. And the thing is, it's almost Bengals-esque where they don't really have these like big name players, right? Like Kyle Hamilton, you have Humphrey, right? But like Jadeveon Clowney's having a good year too. But they don't have like this superstar player on their defense outside of Roquan probably that makes you think they should be the best defense in football. But collectively, what McDonald is doing too as defensive coordinator there, their defense just plays so together, so fast to the ball. It seems like they could cover everything. That's really what sticks out because offensively, they could just beat you in so many ways, right? We have Lamar, right? So far, they've rushed for 100 yards in every game. 6 of 9 games, they've had over 300 total yards. One game, they had 296. They're the third best team in the red zone, the 6th best team on third down. Defensively, they're number 1 in scoring defense by a full 2 points, number 2 in EPA per play, number 2 in success rate. They've allowed more than 100 yards only 3 times this season. They've allowed only 3 quarterbacks go over 300 yards, and one of those quarterbacks was Jared Goff when they won that game 38-6, and Goff got some garbage time yards. They feel right now like the most complete team in the NFL, and Lamar has these games where the Ravens have these games where they win by 30, and you look at Lamar's stat line, you're like, how the hell did they win by 30? It's like Lamar had like a touchdown and like 230, 240 total yards. Like, how are they doing this? And then you look at their running backs with Gus Edwards and Keontae Mitchell had a big breakout game. And it just feels like whoever gets put into this offense, they just succeed. And that's a lot to do with Lamar Jackson. That's a lot to do with Todd Monken as well, who, the offensive system, they've been able to implement it year one, and it's been great so far. But it's really this defense that's carried them this way. The offense has been sensational. Don't get me wrong. Lamar is right up there, top 2, top 3 in terms of MVP conversation. But the defense is playing at such a high level that no matter who they're going up against, it's the other offense that's going to be at the deficit there because they're going to be going up against the best defense in football. And Lamar and company are going to be able to score points. They're going to be able to control time possession. They're not going to turn the ball over. So right now they feel like not just the best team in the NFC, the AFC, but the best team in football.
This might be a hot take, but versus the Seahawks, I thought Seattle played pretty well defensively. I didn't think that the Ravens were just moving the ball up and down on them with ease. I think the Seahawks had their way on some plays. The problem becomes the Seahawks offense was just unable to sustain any drive, and they had some back-breaking turnovers. You had Geno Stone have an interception on Geno Smith where he just read his eyes the entire way, and he's been a breakout for them.
Great,
Kyle Hamilton and Geno Stone, that's arguably the best safety duo in football right now. And then you had Kyle Van Noy, who has kind of had a revival to his career with Baltimore. He had a strip sack on Geno Smith, and it was a fumble. You look at the time of possession. The Ravens had 40 minutes time of possession to the Seahawks 19. They completely dominated the time of possession battle. The Ravens had 298 rushing yards, but you had some breakaway runs from Gus Edwards. Keon Mitchell had a breakaway run for a touchdown. So, I thought the Seahawks defense, they didn't play a terrible game. It's just their offense couldn't get anything going, that their defense was just on the field so much that, they're tired, they're gassed, and it showed with the Ravens having 29 first downs in this game alone. That's unheard of. The Ravens, I think, are playing at one of the best levels in football right now. They're one of the best teams in football. Their best 3 wins have come against the Lions, the Seahawks, and the Bengals, where they beat them 27-24 early in the season. but there's something about this team that I can't completely buy into just yet. You know, from 2018 to 2020, they were 10-6, 14-2, and 11-6, and they didn't get to the AFC Championship in either of these years. The 14-2 season was a year where they were supposed to get to the AFC Championship, and they were just a bit short. People will point to that season and say, well, the offense, they don't have the weapons that we have now, but we've seen this offense this season show us that they aren't the most reliable. Versus the Steelers, that was a winnable game, and their receivers dropped a ton of passes. I cannot take what the Ravens are doing right now over what the history has shown me with the Chiefs and with the Bengals. The Chiefs are 7-2. They're struggling, and they're cruising to victories and can still end up with a bye in the AFC. This is the best defense Mahomes has ever had, and I said earlier, I have faith that Mahomes and the offense will figure it out eventually.
They're cruising to victories right now. I don't know. Miami, they were right at the end. They lost to Denver. That Jets game could have gone either way.
Not cruising to victories. There's a little bit of a scare there.
A little bit.
But it's not nothing to panic about.
I agree.
They aren't losing. They aren't barely winning games like when the Bills barely beat the Giants and it could have gone either way at the end. You know, their defense is holding up at the end. And then I look at the Bengals. You know, they're 5-3 right now. They're not 7-2 like the Ravens. But we just seen in week 3, the Ravens beat the Bengals 27-24, and the Bengals offense was not clicking. Joe Burrow was still injured. I think if these teams matched up right now, it would be a toss-up matchup, and I'd probably lean Bengals. So when I look at what the Bengals and the Chiefs have done, the Chiefs have won a Super Bowl. Their floor is an AFC Championship. The Bengals, the past 2 years, they've been to the AFC Championship, and I can't sleep on the up-and-coming Jaguars. They got a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. I know the passing yard stat for them defensively may not look all that attractive, but in terms of EPA per play, they're 4th in dropback EPA and 8th in success rate on defense, and that shows me that they have a pretty great pass defense. So when it comes to the Ravens, like, you know, they're playing amazing. They've blown out the Seahawks and the Lions, but let's be honest. The Seahawks and the Lions are probably not even a top 5 team in the AFC. You know, in the NFC, they're one of those teams that maybe could come out, but in the AFC, they don't even have a chance. And the Seahawks might not even make the playoffs in the AFC. So for me, I look at the Bengals and their 3 wins against the Bills, where I feel like they dominated them, even though the score might not show it. They dominated the 49ers, and they beat the Seahawks. It was a very close game, but they still beat them. I look at those 3 wins, specifically those 2 wins against the Niners and the Bills, and I feel like, you know, I think that's a bit more impressive than blowing out the Lions and the Seahawks.
I'm with you.
So for me, I think the Ravens are comfortably a top 3 team in the AFC, but to crown them as the best team in the AFC right now, I'll have to wait and see more from them.
Statistically, everything's going to lean in the Baltimore Ravens' favor. And, of course, just watching them, they seem – you want to talk about cruising. In their victories, that feels like a cruising.
Yeah.
But to me, right now, from what I've seen the last 4 weeks that the Cincinnati Bengals have played football, to me, this is right now the safest, best team in football. And you're smiling, and it's deserved. Because I'll tell you what, these last 3 games, going up against Seattle, going up against the Niners, going up against the Buffalo Bills, 2 of the 3 offenses you would say are safe. Talking about the Niners, talking about the Buffalo Bills. I give a little bit of slack to the Seahawks because they've been a little bit inconsistent. Although I like the players over there. I like the personnel. They've been able to do a decent job so far this season. But when they've gone up against tougher competition, they've seemingly folded outside of Detroit. Now, with Cincinnati, their defense has played at such a high level. Going up against the Niners didn't allow them to score 20 points. Going up against Buffalo didn't allow them to score 20 points. Over these last 2 weeks, I'll say, because we can't include 3, because Seattle's defense really has been under the radar, sneaky good. They limited Joe Burrow and company to 17 points. The defense really edged out that victory over Seattle, where they had 2 red zone opportunities. The Bengals were able to nip that in the bud and turn them over on downs. But talking about the Niners, we spoke about it last week. They looked near perfect offensively. And now going up against the Bills, we finally see T. Higgins break out. Has 9 targets, 8 catches, goes for over 100 yards. Now you're telling me that T. Higgins is back when Jamar Chase has played at a high level, although did land pretty harshly on his back. Hopefully he's doing okay. We've seen Joe Mixon play at a high level. Now Joe Burrow's back in form where he's getting outside the pocket. He's making plays. He's extending plays. That is where Cincinnati's at their best. The biggest question so far in this season with Cincinnati has been Joe Burrow's health. But I've said if Joe Burrow's healthy, you give him the benefit of the doubt and you trust what they can do going forward. Lou Anarumo has been one of the best, if not the best, defensive coordinators in football. What he's been able to do with this team, with the young players on the squad, has been overly impressive. And for me, you're telling me that they have one of the best defenses in football, and now one of the best offenses in football is now 100% healthy and clicking on all cylinders. You have to lean Cincinnati because with the Chiefs, they have an amazing defense, but that offense is seemingly lagging behind. You know it's Patrick Mahomes. They have Kelsey and Andy Reid. You anticipate that they can get back to form, but Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, you're going to tell me that Irv Smith's now going to get involved in the red zone and start getting those opportunities? Joe Mixon playing at a very efficient high level, and the defense playing the way that it is, to me personally, I understand that it's only been 4 weeks, but this is the healthiest that they've looked. They've looked dominant, and it's been against great teams. To me, the Bengals are the best team in the AFC right now.
I don't hate that the Bengals have looked great. I think two things. One, I think the Ravens match up well with Cincy. They've given Joe Burrow some problems these last few times they've gone up against them. And two, I don't think it's the same Lamar Jackson we've seen this last 2-3 years. Even when they went 14-2 and he won MVP, this Lamar Jackson I think is better. I think as a passer he is significantly better.
So confident. That's
so
really
confident, especially from the pocket, just being able to throw with anticipation and touch. I feel like he wasn't as advanced, and still that 14-2 year, that was his first full year starting in the league, right? So going to the playoff game, of course, he doesn't have the best playoff success, but I think the Ravens can give Joe Burrow. I think they could give them any elite quarterback fits. And I think Lamar Jackson, I understand the history that we've seen the Ravens kind of come up short these last few years. They've had great teams. They've had some good defenses, some good offenses. I just think Lamar Jackson's playing at a different level than we've seen him in the past.
I'll be the first one to admit that Joe Burrow has struggled against this new-look Ravens defense led by Mike Macdonald. Mm-hmm. Mike Macdonald's going to be a head coach pretty soon. He's that good. The way he disguises his coverages, it tricks a lot of quarterbacks, Definitely. Not just Joe Burrow. And the Ravens have some talent. You mentioned Jadeveon Clowney, but Kyle Van Noy's playing really well.
He has been.
Odafe Awe, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He's playing well. Matabuki and Michael Pearson, the interior, they're doing some damage. And, of course, Roquan Smith has really been the difference maker in that defense. Once they propped him in, they became an elite unit. But I trust Joe Burrow.
I don't blame him. He's a good guy.
He's had his trouble in the past against the Ravens defense and against these disguises. But am I going to bank on that to continue happening? I think eventually Joe Burrow is going to figure it out because eventually Joe Burrow does figure it out. And against the Bills, Joe Burrow, he's the best zone quarterback in the NFL, throwing against zone. Joe Burrow completed 21 of his 26 passes for 220 yards versus zone coverage against the Bills. Joe Burrow is one of the best quarterbacks against zone coverage, and that's what teams typically play against the Bengals because they cannot line up man-to-man on T. Higgins and Jamar Chase.
There's almost no one that can.
That's a recipe for disaster. So I think Joe Burrow will figure it out. And as great as Lamar Jackson has been, he right now is the front runner for MVP of the league. Joe Burrow, when he's healthy, is still better. So I'm taking the better quarterback in Lou Anarumo. There's few guys I trust more to game plan for one game than Lou Anarumo. So I think the Bengals, this is right now they're going on a run, and this can be the hottest team in the league going into the playoffs. When they were 3-3 heading into the bye week, we looked at the Niners and the Bills like, man, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough, man. They might be lucky to win one of these games. Once they cruise by the 49ers, you said, they're going to beat the Bills. We know they're going to beat the Bills. Now they're 5-3. And their next couple of games aren't that difficult. Mm-hmm. It's the Texans, and then in 2 weeks we're gonna see
that's Thursday
that Ravens and Bengals matchup. We're gonna see the Ravens and the Bengals, and we're gonna see them go toe to toe. And you know what? My early predictions for that game, I think the Bengals keep rolling, man. I think the Bengals are that good right now.
At Baltimore.
Okay. Oh, so Baltimore won in Cincy earlier this year. Okay.
They did.
The issue for that becomes kind of similar to the conversation that we just had with the Cowboys and the Eagles, right? You would lean one way over the other, but in a division matchup, it's so tough to really know the concrete outcome of how it's going to end up. In reality, you're 100% right. The last time, of course, excluding week 2, but going into last season, the postseason where Lamar Jackson didn't play, We saw Joe Burrow struggling. We really saw the defense
Tyler Huntley
of the
almost won that
Cincinnati
game.
Bengals. That's a fact. And if it was a fumble in the red zone that ended up being recovered for a touchdown, that ended up being the deciding factor of the game. The Ravens defense is elite and definitely can give the Bengals issues. But where you start to feel a little bit more confident if you're a Bengals supporter is that the Bengals defense can keep up with any team in the league.